The great meeting hall of Nexus Station buzzed with nervous whispers. Representatives from 43 different worlds sat around the massive circular table, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had scales that changed, color with their emotions. Others had wings that twitched when they were afraid. Few had multiple eyes that darted around the room like frightened animals. They were all scared. Captain Tejo walked into the hall with steady steps. His black uniform was simple compared to the fancy robes and armor of the other delegates. Behind him, Lieutenant Myong carried a small datapad and nothing else. The other species had brought guards, advisors, and huge cases of equipment. The humans had brought to people. The human delegation has arrived, announced the station's computer voice. Several alien heads turned to look at them. Tejo was not impressive by galactic standards. He stood only 6 feet tall, had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. His skin was soft, his eyes were small. By the laws of nature that ruled the galaxy, he should have been prey. But something about the way he moved made others step aside. The Nexus Station was the biggest structure ever built by the Galactic Council. It floated in neutral space, far from any star system. The meeting hall could hold thousands, but today it felt small and cramped. Fear had a way of making large spaces feel tiny. Tejo took his seat at the table, the nameplate in front of him. Read Earth Sol System. It was a new addition to the Council. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 20 years ago. Most species still thought of them as curiosities rather than equals. "We must begin," said Counselor Veltar. The meeting's leader. He was a Zenthari, a species that looked like tall, thin birds with 4 arms. His feathers were bright blue, but they kept turning gray with worry. The Vorthok Empire has sent another message. The room fell silent. Even the constant hum of the station's life support seemed to quiet down. "They demand the surrender of 12. More systems," Veltar continued. "If we refuse, they promise complete destruction. They give us 7 solar days to decide." A delegate from the Million Collective stood up. Her people looked like large cats that walked on 2 legs. "I cannot fight them," she said, her voice shaking. "They have destroyed everything in their path. Whole worlds turned to ash. Billions dead." The Corvash tried to resist, added another delegate. Their fleet was the 3rd largest in the galaxy. The Vorthok crushed them in 6 hours. Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. Tejo listened without speaking. Myung took notes on her datapad. "Perhaps we should consider their terms," suggested a delegate from the Outer Rim. "If we give them what they want, maybe they will leave the core worlds alone." "You fool," snapped the Million. "The Vorthok do not make deals. They take everything, until nothing is left. My people learned this the hard way." The argument that followed was loud and messy. Some species wanted to run, others wanted to hide. A few suggested sending gifts to the Vorthok leaders, hoping to buy time. None suggested. Fighting Tejo finally stood up. The room gradually became quiet. "I would like to see this message," he said simply. Veltar's feathers shifted to yellow, a sign of confusion. "Captain, I do not think, please." Tejo interrupted gently. "Show us what we are dealing with." The lights dimmed. A holographic projector in the center of the table activated. The image that appeared made several delegates gasp and move backward in their chairs. Admiral Kreshtar of the Vorthok Empire materialized above the table. He stood 7 feet tall and was covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His arms ended in claws that could slice through metal. His mouth held rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. His eyes burned yellow like small suns. This was what an apex predator looked like. "Weak creatures of the so-called Galactic Council," Kreshtar's voice was deep and filled with contempt. "You have received our terms. Surrender the systems of Altair, Vega, Rigel, and 9 others. Your populations will serve the Empire. Your resources will feed our war machine." Kreshtar's burning gaze seemed to search the room even through the recording. "If you refuse, we will take them anyway. But first, we will burn your core worlds. We will hunt your species to extinction. Your children will know only fear before they die." Around the table, delegates trembled. Some had covered their eyes. Others were making religious gestures from their homeworlds, but Teho watched calmly. His dark eyes studied the image with the same focus a scientist might use to examine an interesting specimen. Myung glanced at her captain, but stayed quiet. The recording continued. You have 7 solar days. Do not test our patience. The Vorthok Empire has ruled for 3,000 years. We have never known defeat. We have never shown mercy. Weakness disgusts us, but it will serve our purposes. The image flickered and disappeared. Lights came back up slowly. The room was silent except for the sound of frightened breathing. Well, said Veltar quietly, you have seen it. What do you think, Captain Teho? All eyes turned to the human. He sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. I think Teho said that Admiral Kreshtar has never met a human. Several delegates made sounds that might have been laughter, but it was the nervous kind that came from fear. Captain, said the million delegate, I mean no disrespect to your species, but look at yourself. Look at him. Your people are traitors. And diplomats, the Vorthok, are living weapons. They are apex predators. They have conquered half the galaxy. Teho nodded slowly. Yes, they are predators. Very good ones, I think. But they have made one mistake. What mistake? Asked Veltar. Teho's expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. It was small and easy to miss. But for just a moment, the delegates saw something that made them understand why humans had survived on a world full of dangerous creatures. You think being a predator makes them strong, Teho said quietly. They have never learned what humans know, which is pressed the million delegate. That sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that learned to hunt predators. The room fell silent again. This time, the silence felt different. It was not the quiet of fear. It was the quiet of possibility. Myung spoke for the first time. Captain Teho has authorization from Earth Command to offer military assistance. To the Galactic Council, you would fight them, Svelter, his feathers shifting to bright orange with surprise. If necessary, Teho replied. But first, we would like to try something else. What? Teho smiled. It was not a cruel smile. But it was not entirely friendly either. We'd like to teach Admiral Kreshtar about humans. The human quarters on Nexus Station were simple and clean. Teho sat at a small desk, looking at old photos on his personal tablet. The images showed a younger man in different uniforms, standing with other soldiers in places that looked like they had seen too much fighting. Myung entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down next to her captain and sat across from him. The council voted, she said quietly. 41 in favor of accepting our help. 2 abstained. Teho nodded but did not look up from his tablet. And the preparations. Lieutenant Bioram has arrived with the tactical team. Commander Sungmin is setting up communications with Earth Fleet. They should be here in 36 hours. Good. Teho touched the screen, and the image changed to show a group of soldiers in a destroyed city. Have you ever wondered why humans are the only species that fights the way we do? Myung looked at the photo. She recognized some of the faces from Teho's old stories. Because we had to learn, because we had no choice. Teho set the tablet down and picked up his coffee. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds where they were either predators or prey. They knew their place in the natural order. Touched the tablet again. This time the photo showed 2 young soldiers sharing food in what looked like a bombed-out building. One of them was clearly a younger Teho. The other was a man with kind eyes and a tired smile. Earth was different. We were prey animals that learned to hunt. We were pack creatures that learned to fight alone when we had to. We were peaceful beings that learned to make war when peace was not enough. The photo showed the kind-eyed soldier, giving his food ration to a small child who was hiding in the rubble. His name was Hyen Su Teho, said softly. He was my squad leader during the Korean Peninsula conflicts. I was just a kid then, barely 18. My name was Jin Woo in those days, before I earned my rank and chose my service name. Had heard parts of this story before, but never the details. She stayed quiet and listened. Hyansu taught me that being strong did not mean being the biggest or the most dangerous. It meant being willing to do what was necessary, even when it hurt. The door chimed, and Lieutenant Borum entered. She was tall for a Korean woman, with short-cut hair and the bearing of someone who had spent years making life-or-death decisions quickly. "Captain," she said with a salute, "the alien defense coordinators are requesting a meeting. They want to understand our tactical approach." Taeho smiled. "I imagine they do. Have them meet us in conference room 7 in 1 hour." "In BRM? Yes, sir." "Bring the full battle records from Mars Colonial War. They need to see what human warfare really looks like." Borum left, and Myung poured herself more coffee. "Are you going to tell them about Hyeonsu?" Eventually, Taeho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars looked cold and distant. But first, they need to understand the difference between fighting to conquer and fighting to protect. An hour later, Conference Room 7 was filled with nervous alien officers. They represented the military forces of a dozen different species. Most of them had never fought a real war. Their ships were designed for patrol duty and showing force. It's not for actual combat. General Thrix of the Altarian Defense Corps was a large, insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes. "Captain Taeho," he said in a buzzing voice, "we appreciate your offer of assistance, but we must be honest. Your species is new to galactic warfare. Perhaps you do not understand what we face." "The Vorthok are apex predators," added Commander Zelenara of the Regelian fleet. She looked like a cross between a dolphin and a bird. "They have conquered 12 systems in the past year alone. Their ships are twice the size of ours. Their weapons are more advanced. Their soldiers are trained from birth to kill." Taeho nodded politely. "You are right. We are new to galactic warfare. But we are not new to war itself." He gestured to Borum, who activated the room's holographic display. The image that appeared showed a battle in space, but it was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random at first. They did not form neat battle lines like civilized species. Instead, they darted in and out of enemy formations like schools of fish avoiding sharks. Some ships appeared to retreat, only to circle back and attack from unexpected angles. "Is from the Mars Colonial War," Taeho explained. "Human colonists against the Earth's corporate fleet. The colonists were outnumbered 10 to 1. They had older ships and fewer weapons." The holographic battle continued. The aliens watched in fascination as the smaller human force gradually wore down their larger opponents through tactics that seemed to have no pattern or logic. "But they won," whispered General Thrix. "They won," confirmed Borum, by refusing to fight the way their enemies expected. They turned the battle into something their opponents did not understand. Commander Seungmin entered the room. He was a compact man with gray hair and steady hands. Behind him came Engineer Yoonji, a young woman carrying several data tablets, and Medic Jaehin, whose kind face reminded everyone of a concerned grandfather. "The Earth fleet has arrived," Seungmin reported. 47 ships. Admiral Insu sends his greetings and asks for tactical briefing. The alien officers exchange glances. 47 ships seemed like a small number compared to the Vorthok fleet reports. Eung stepped forward. "Captain, I have been reviewing the alien defense technologies. With your permission, I would like to suggest some modifications." "Show us," Taeho said. The holographic display changed to show technical blueprints. The alien ships were beautiful and elegant, designed more for exploration and trade than fighting. But Youngji's proposed changes were disturbing. She wanted to add armor in strange places, modify engines for rapid acceleration, and install weapon systems that could be operated by smaller crews. "Why these changes?" asked Zell. Single quotes Nara looked uncomfortable. "Because, Commander, your ships are designed for honorable combat between civilized species. Human ships are designed to win ugly fights against enemies who play by different rules." Manik Jahayan spoke quietly. "The Vorthok attack civilian populations to break enemy morale. They use fear as a weapon. They do not distinguish between soldiers and non-combatants." "Yes," said General Thrix. "That is what makes them so terrifying." "No," said Taeho firmly. "That is what makes them predictable." He walked to the holographic display and pointed to various tactical positions. "The Vorthok fight like apex predators. They rely on size, strength, and intimidation. They attack directly and expect their enemies to run or submit. The display changed to show Earth's surface. The image was of a city that had been bombed, but people were still living in the ruins. Children played in the rubble while their parents worked to rebuild. Humans learned long ago that predators have weaknesses. They are used to their prey acting like prey. They do not know what to do when prey fights back in ways they do not expect. The room was quiet. The alien officers stared at the image of human civilians living and working in a war zone as if it was normal. See, continued Tejo. The Vorthok have never fought a species that considers sacrifice to be a form of strength. They have never faced enemies who get more dangerous when they are hurt instead of less dangerous. He touched the display controls and the image changed to show the photo of Hyunsu sharing his food with the child. This man taught me that sometimes. The strongest thing you can do is give up your advantage to protect someone weaker. The Vorthok would see this as foolish weakness. They would be wrong. General Thrix's compound eyes focused on the image. What happened to him? He died saving a school full of children during the siege of Seoul. He could have escaped with the rest of our unit. Instead, he stayed behind to hold off enemy forces until the evacuation was complete. And this made your army stronger? Zelenara Tejo smiled, but there was sadness in it. It made us human. And being human, it turns out, is something the galaxy has never seen before. Bjorn stepped forward. Captain, the Vorthok advanced scouts have been detected at the edge of the Altair system. They will arrive in force within 72 hours. Alien officers looked terrified again. Tejo seemed almost relieved. Good, he said. It is time to teach Admiral Kreshtar what happens when an apex predator meets a species that learned to hunt by being hunted. He turned to face the assembled officers. Send a message to all fleet commanders. Tell them to prepare for combat. And tell them that we are not going to fight like civilized beings. What are we going to fight like? Asked General Thrix. Tejo's expression grew serious, like humans. The Vorthok war fleet came out of hyperspace like a storm made of metal and death. 300 ships, each one larger than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, their dark holes absorbing light like hungry shadows. Admiral Kreshtar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Sovereign. Through the massive viewing window, he could see the pathetic defense fleet waiting for him. 47 human ships that looked tiny compared to his mighty vessels. A handful of alien ships that were clearly built for peace, not war. Pitiful, he growled, his clawed hands gripping the command rail. They send children to fight warriors. His second-in-command, Captain Vexte, bowed low. Admiral, we detect unusual energy patterns from the human vessels. Their formations do not match any known tactical doctrine. Kreshtar's yellow eyes narrowed. Explain. They appear to be scattered, Admiral. No clear battle lines, no protective formations. It is as if they do not know how to fight. A deep rumbling sound came from Kreshtar's throat. It was Vorthok laughter. Of course they do not know how to fight. They are prey animals playing at being predators. This will be finished quickly. On the bridge of the human command ship Soul's Pride, Captain Tejo watched the Vorthok fleet approach. His crew worked at their stations with calm efficiency. No one showed fear. Tactical report, Tejo said quietly. Lieutenant Borum studied her displays. 300 enemy vessels. Capital ships average twice our mass. Weapons output approximately 4 times our maximum. Communications. Commander Sungmin nodded from his station. All human ships report ready. Coalition forces are holding. Position as ordered. Engineering status. Yunji looked up from her console. All modifications complete, Captain. Alien ships have been fitted with our defensive packages. They may not like what we have done to their beautiful designs, but they will survive longer. Tejo smiled slightly. The human modifications had turned elegant exploration vessels into something that looked more like flying fortresses. The alien crews had been horrified at first, but they trusted human experience. Sir, called Communications Officer Dong Hyen, the Vorthok are transmitting. On screen. Berkstar's image filled the main viewer. His reptilian features were even more frightening in real time than they had been in the recording. Several alien bridge officers on nearby ships probably wet themselves at the sight. "I am Admiral Kreshtar of the Vorthok Empire," the massive predator announced. "You have assembled this pitiful fleet to oppose us. This is amusing." Stepped forward until he was clearly visible on his own transmission. "I am Captain Tejo of the Earth Defense Corps. We are here to defend the Altair system." Kreshtar leaned closer to his camera. His burning eyes studied the small human with curiosity. "You are the species they call human, yes? I have heard. Stories, traitors, and diplomats. Weak creatures who avoid conflict." "You have heard some stories," Tejo replied calmly. "But not all of them. It does not matter. You will surrender your fleet immediately, or I will destroy every ship and hunt your species to extinction. This is your only warning." Tejo was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. "Admiral Kreshtar, I have a counterproposal." The Vorthok admiral's scales shifted color with surprise. "You dare make demands of me?" "Not a demand, a warning." Tejo's expression did not change. "Turn your fleet around and leave this system. Go home. Find a different path for your people." The sound that came from Kreshtar was definitely laughter now. "Little human, do you not understand what stands before you? I command the greatest war fleet in galactic history. My people have never known defeat. We are apex predators, and you are prey." "Yes," said Tejo simply. "You are apex predators. But you have made one critical error." "What error could prey animals possibly teach predators?" Tejo's eyes grew cold. "You assumed we were prey?" The transmission ended. On both sides, crews prepared for battle. "All ships," Tejo announced over the fleet communications. "Execute. Plan Hahyansu. Remember what we fight for." The human fleet began to move, but not in any pattern the Vorthok had ever seen. Instead of forming battle lines or defensive screens, the ships scattered in all directions like leaves in a windstorm. Some appeared to be running away. Others dove toward the Vorthok formation at impossible angles. "What are they doing?" demanded. Captain Vextai, Kreshtar, studied the tactical display with growing confusion. "I do not know. Perhaps they have panicked. All ships advance and destroy them before they can escape." The Vorthok fleet moved forward in their traditional formation. 3 massive wedges of warships, designed to smash through any defensive line. It had worked against every enemy they had ever faced. But the humans were not forming a defensive line. Pilot Sojin led her fighter squadron in a diving attack on the lead Vorthok cruiser. Her small ship darted between the massive vessel's weapon turrets, too fast and too small to target effectively. Behind her, 11 other fighters followed. In a weaving pattern that looked random, but was actually carefully planned. "Target their sensor arrays," Sojin ordered. "Line them first." The fighters struck like angry wasps, hitting weak points and disappearing before return fire could lock onto them. The Vorthok had never fought enemies that used such tactics. Meanwhile, the larger human ships began their own attacks. But instead of engaging in honorable ship-to-ship combat, they used hit-and-run strikes. 3 human destroyers would appear from behind an asteroid, fire every weapon they had, then disappear into hyperspace before the Vorthok could respond. "This is not how civilized species fight," roared Vextai. "They are not civilized," Kreshtar replied, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "They are acting like wild animals." The battle continued for 2 hours. The Vorthok scored several hits on human vessels, but the damage was never as bad as it should have been. The humans had reinforced their ships in strange ways, focusing on survival rather than offensive power. Worse, the humans seemed to be learning from each engagement. They adapted their tactics in real time, changing their approach whenever the Vorthok found a way to counter them. Technical specialist Minho aboard the human ship Bizen's Hammer worked frantically to repair battle damage while the ship engaged in a running fight with 2 Vorthok cruisers. "Hull breach on Deck 7, he called out. "Damage control teams respond," ordered his captain. "Minho, how long until we can jump to hyperspace?" 30 seconds. Minho's hands flew over his controls. "But the port engine is offline." We only need one engine to run away, the captain replied grimly. This was the pattern of the battle. The humans would strike, take damage, disappear, repair quickly, then strike again from a different angle. They were not trying to win a glorious victory. They were trying to survive while inflicting maximum damage on their enemies. It was a style of warfare the Vorthok had never encountered. Admiral, reported Vextai, we have destroyed 11 enemy vessels, but our own losses are significant. Kreshtar's eyes burned brighter. How significant? 43 ships damaged, 12 destroyed, and the humans. They are not fighting the way enemies should fight. Explain. When we damage their ships, they do not retreat in defeat. Become more aggressive. When we corner them, they do not surrender. They fight harder. No. On the human command ship, Medik Jehayon worked on wounded crew members while the ship shook from enemy fire. Captain, he called to Teho the coalition, ships are requesting permission to withdraw. Their captains say this battle is madness. Teho never took his eyes off the tactical display. Tell them they may withdraw if they wish. But remind them that if we fail here, the Vorthok will hunt their families to extinction.
A coalition?
Ship stayed. Damage control expert Hay-1 ran through the corridors of the Soul's Pride, leading repair teams to critical areas. The ship had taken heavy damage, but it was still fighting. Weapons arrayed back online, she reported. But I cannot promise how long it will stay that way. Long enough, Teho replied. Hours passed. The battle turned into something neither side had expected. The Vorthok found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to play by the rules of civilized warfare. The humans treated every engagement as a fight for survival, because that was exactly what it was. Sir, called Donghayan from his communication station. Priority message from Admiral Insu aboard the Gangnam Victory. The ship is badly damaged, but he reports that the Vorthok flagship has moved away from the main fleet. Teho looked at the tactical display. Indeed, Kreshtar's massive ship had positioned itself where it could have a clear shot at the human command vessel. He wants a duel, Borum observed. Then he shall have one, Teho said quietly. All ships, continue the mission. Set course for the Blood Sovereign. Sir Myung said softly. That ship outguns us 10-1. Teho smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was not entirely sad either. Yes, it does. But Admiral Kreshtar still does not understand what he is fighting, which is a species that learned that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. The two ships moved toward each other through the chaos of battle. The apex predator and the human were about to meet face to face. The two massive ships circled each other like ancient gladiators in an arena made of stars. The Blood Sovereign was 3 times larger than the Soul's Pride, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could turn planets to glass. But the human ship moved with a deadly grace that made Admiral Kreshtar uneasy. Fire all forward batteries, Kreshtar commanded. Streams of plasma fire lit up the space between the ships. The human vessel rolled and twisted, avoiding most of the deadly energy. What hits it could not dodge. It absorbed on reinforced armor. That should not have been strong enough to stop Vorthok weapons. Impossible, muttered Captain Vextai. Those modifications should not work. On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, alarms were screaming. The ship shuddered under the impact of weapons designed to destroy much larger vessels. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, reported Minho from damage control. Emergency force fields. Are holding but barely? Can we return fire? Asked Teho. Forward weapons are damaged, replied Bjorum. But the port side battery is still operational. Then use it. The human ship spun around its own axis and fired a concentrated burst at the Vorthok flagship. The shots were much smaller than what Kreshtar's ship could produce, but they struck with surgical precision at weak points in the massive vessel's armor. Damage report, Kreshtar roared. Minor hull damage, reported his weapons officer. But they targeted our sensor array again. It is the same tactic their smaller ships used. Kreshtar's eyes burned brighter. These humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not try to match his firepower. Instead, they struck at his ability to see and coordinate his attacks. Sir, called Sung Min from the communication station, we are receiving data from our other ships. The main battle is not going well for either side. Tejo glanced at the tactical display while dodging another volley of plasma fire. The human fleet was holding its own, but barely. They had lost 18 ships. The Vorthok had lost 37, but they had started with many more. What about civilian evacuation? He asked. Transport ships are loading refugees from the outer colonies, reported Donghayan. But the Vorthok sent fast attack ships to intercept them. Tejo's expression hardened. Show me. The main screen split to show a horrifying sight. Vorthok destroyers were hunting down civilian ships, filled with families trying to escape the war zone. The transport vessels had no weapons and no armor. They were helpless. Those are non-combatants, Myung said quietly. The Vorthok do not care, replied Tejo. To them, terror is just another weapon. On the Vorthok flagship, Kreshtar was also watching the hunt. To him, it was a perfectly logical tactic. Destroy the enemy's reason to fight, and they would surrender quickly, Admiral reported his intelligence officer. Our fast attack squadron is engaging the evacuation fleet. Estimated time to complete destruction, 20 minutes. Excellent. When the humans see their civilians burning, they will lose heart. But Admiral Kreshtar did not understand humans. All ships, Tejo announced. Over the fleet communications, Priority 1 emergency. Civilian evacuation fleet is under attack. All available units, break off current engagements and protect the transports. Sir, said Bjorn, if we divert ships from the main battle, the Vorthok will break through our lines. I know. They could. Destroy our remaining forces. I know. Bjorn stared at her captain. Sir, tactically speaking, sacrificing the civilian ships would be the logical choice. We could save the fleet and continue fighting. Tejo looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. It was not angry, but it was completely unyielding. Lieutenant Borum, in all your tactical training, did anyone ever teach you that there are things more important than winning? Before she could answer, the ship shook under another barrage from the Vorthok flagship. But Tejo was no longer focused on his duel with Kreshtar. He was watching his fleet break formation and race toward the civilian ships. What are they doing? Demanded Vexed Eye on the Vorthok bridge. Kreshtar studied the tactical display with growing confusion. They are abandoning their defensive positions to save non-combatants. But that will leave their core fleet exposed. Yes, it will. Kreshtar's scales shifted color. In 3,000 years of warfare, he had never seen an enemy voluntarily weaken their position to protect civilians. Are they insane? The answer came quickly. Human ships threw themselves between the Vorthok attackers and the helpless transports. Destroyer Inchin's Fury took on 3 enemy ships at once, its captain knowing it was a suicide mission. Cruiser Dagu's Hope used its own hull as a shield when a transport ship's engines failed. Pilot Sojin led her fighters in desperate attacks on ships 10 times their size. All squadrons, protect the children, she called over the radio, no matter what it costs. Medical Officer Dayun worked frantically in the Soul's Pride sickbay as wounded. Crew members were brought in from the latest exchange of fire. We need more power to the medical scanners, she called. Power systems are at 40%, replied Chief Woojin from engineering. I can give you 5 more minutes of full power, but then we will lose life support on 3 decks. Do it. Was the pattern across the human fleet? Every crew member, from the highest officer to the newest recruit, made the same choice. Protect the innocent, no matter the cost. On the Vorthok flagship, Admiral Kreshtar watched in stunned silence as his perfectly logical battle plan fell apart. The humans were not acting like any enemy he had ever fought. They were making decisions that weakened their own position for no tactical advantage. Admiral reported his tactical officer. Our attack on the civilian fleet has been ... repelled. The humans lost 11 warships protecting the transports. 11 ships? Kreshtar's voice was quiet. They sacrificed 11 military vessels to save non-combatants. Yes, sir. And now their main battle line is compromised. It can break through and destroy their remaining forces. But Kreshtar did not give the order to attack. He was staring at the tactical display, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. Technical specialist Kyung-soo aboard the human ship. Olsen's shield managed to hack into Vorthok communication channels. What he heard made him call his captain. Immediately, sir, you need to hear this. I am picking up confused chatter from the Vorthok command ships. They are asking their officers to explain human tactical doctrine. What are they saying? They cannot understand why we would sacrifice military assets to protect civilians. Their own battle computers are calling our actions tactically impossible, because no rational species would make such choices. Meanwhile, intelligence analyst the Jin had been studying Vorthok cultural databases. Captain Taeho, she called over the communications. I think I understand something important about our enemies. Go ahead. The Vorthok evolved as apex predators. On a world where strength meant survival, their entire culture is based on the idea that the strong dominate the weak. They have never encountered a species that finds strength through protecting others. On the Vorthok flagship, the confusion was spreading. Captain Vexdai approached his admiral with a troubling report. Sir, our fleet commanders are requesting new orders. They say the humans are not responding to our tactics the way enemies should. Respond. How do you mean? When we damage their ships, they fight harder instead of retreating. When we threaten their civilians, they sacrifice their military forces to protect them. When we show overwhelming force, they adapt instead of surrendering. Kreshtar's claws scraped against the metal railing. What are you saying? I am saying, Admiral, that perhaps these humans are not the prey animals we thought they were. At that moment, the Soul's Pride launched another attack on the Vorthok flagship. But this time, something was different. The human ship was badly damaged, life support failing, weapons barely operational. By all logical standards, it should have withdrawn from the fight. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the much larger Vorthok vessel. What is that human doing? Demanded Vexti. Kreshtar watched the damaged ship approach and felt something he had never experienced before. He was not sure what to call it, but if he had been human, he might have recognized it as respect. He is teaching us, Kreshtar said quietly, that there are different ways to be strong. The two ships were about to collide when both captains made the same decision at the same moment. They ordered emergency stop. Vessels came to rest barely 100 meters apart, close enough that their crews could see each other through the viewing ports. Open a communication channel, ordered Kreshtar, sir. It's Vexdai. I said open a channel. I want to speak to this human. Captain Taeho appeared on the main screen of the Vorthok bridge. His uniform was torn. There was blood on his forehead, and his ship was clearly dying around him. But his eyes were still steady and calm. Admiral Kreshtar, he said simply. Captain Taeho. Kreshtar studied the small human with new interest. I have been watching your fleet fight, and I do not understand your tactics. You sacrifice military advantages to protect non-combatants. You weaken your own position to help others. By every logical standard, you should have been destroyed hours ago. Taeho smiled slightly. But we were not destroyed. No, you were not. Kreshtar leaned forward. Explain this to me. How does protecting the weak make you strong? 'Cause, Admiral, when you fight only for conquest, you fight alone. You fight to protect others, you never fight alone. The Vorthok Admiral was quiet for a long moment. You'd rather die protecting others than live by abandoning them? Yes, even when it gains you nothing matters. For the first time in his long life, Admiral Kreshtar found himself looking at an enemy and feeling something other than contempt or hunger. He was not sure what it was, but it made him uncomfortable. Captain Taeho, he said slowly, I think it is time we talked. The docking tube connecting the two flagships was in strange sight. On one side, the sleek technology of the Vorthok Empire. On the other, the practical, battle-scarred hull of a human warship. Two different ideas of what strength meant joined. By a fragile tunnel in the darkness of space, Captain Taeho walked through the tube with Security Chief Geneseo and diplomatic aide, Bitna. The artificial gravity felt different on the Vorthok side, heavier, as if the ship itself was designed to remind visitors who was stronger. The airlock opened with a hiss. They stepped into the enemy flagship. Admiral Kreshtar waited for them in what the Vorthok called the honor chamber. It was a vast room with high ceilings and walls covered in the weapons of defeated enemies. Thousands of swords, guns, and artifacts from dozens of conquered species. A museum of death and domination. But Kreshtar was not trying to intimidate his guests. He stood in the center of the room, his massive form somehow seeming smaller than it had on the view screen. Behind him, Captain Vexti and several other Vorthok officers watched with expressions that mixed curiosity with confusion. Captain Teho Kreshtar said, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. "You came. You asked to talk?" Teho replied simply, "I listen when enemies want to talk." "Enemy?" Kreshtar tested the word. "Yes, that is what we are supposed to be. But I have been thinking about what I saw today, and I am not certain I understand what an enemy is anymore." Genesio shifted slightly, his hand near his weapon. But Teho remained relaxed, studying the massive reptilian figure with the same calm attention he had shown during their first meeting. "What do you want to know?" Teho asked. "I want to know why you sacrifice your advantages to help the weak. I want to know why your soldiers fight harder when they are losing instead of surrendering when they are beaten. I want to know why you would rather die protecting others than live by abandoning them." Kreshtar began walking around the room, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "In 3,000 years, my people have conquered half the galaxy. We have faced every kind of enemy, species that were larger than us, species that were more advanced than us, species that outnumbered us by millions. All of them fell because they could not match our strength." He stopped in front of a display case holding the crown of some long-dead alien king. "But today, for the first time, we fought an enemy that became stronger by making themselves weaker. How is this possible?" Teho looked around the room at all the trophies of war. "May I tell you a story, Admiral?" "Speak." "Many years ago, I was a young soldier fighting in a war on my home world. My squad was trapped in a city that was being destroyed by enemy forces. We could have escaped, but there were civilians hiding. In the buildings around us, children mostly." Bitna translated quietly for the Vorthok officers who did not speak Standard Galactic. "My squad leader was a man named Hyansu. He was the strongest person I have ever known, but not because he could fight well. He was strong because he cared more about protecting others than protecting himself." Teho walked to one of the weapon displays and studied an ancient sword. "When the enemy found our position, Hyansu ordered the rest of us to evacuate the civilians. He stayed behind alone to hold them off." "And he died," said Kreshtar. "Yes, he died. Then how did this make him strong? Dead beings have no strength." Teho turned to face the Admiral. "Because his choice to sacrifice himself saved 43 children, because watching him make that choice taught me and my fellow soldiers what true strength looks like. Because 20 years later, I still make decisions based on what he taught me that day." The room was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's engines. "You see, Admiral, when Hyansu died protecting those children, he did not become weaker. Became part of something larger than himself. His strength lived on in everyone he influenced. That is why humans fight the way we do. We know that some things are more important than individual survival." Vexti spoke for the first time. "But this makes no evolutionary sense. Species that sacrifice themselves for others should become extinct. Should they?" asked Teho. "Should species that only care about themselves eventually destroy everything worth protecting?" Kreshtar was studying the human captain with new eyes. "You are saying that your weakness is actually your strength?" "I am saying that what you call weakness, we call humanity." The Vorthok Admiral walked to the center of the room and sat down. Heavily in a chair that looked like a throne made from the bones of some massive creature. For the first time since the humans had met him, he looked tired. "For 3,000 years, he said slowly, my people have believed that strength comes from domination, that the strong have the right to rule the weak, that mercy is foolishness and compassion is a flaw that evolution should remove." He looked up at Teho. "But today, I watched your species fight a battle that you should have lost. I watched you sacrifice military advantages to protect non-combatants. I watched your soldiers become more determined when they were hurt instead of less determined. And despite everything my people believe about strength and weakness, you did not lose, said Teho quietly. We did not lose. Teho closed his eyes for a moment. 137. And how many of mine? I do not know exactly. More than that. Kreshtar stood up slowly. His massive form cast a shadow over the humans, but somehow he no longer seemed threatening. Captain Teho, I have a question that I have never asked before in my entire life. What question? What if my people have been wrong? What if there is a different way to be strong? The question hung in the air like a challenge to the fundamental nature of the universe. Teho reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal object. It was his service medal from the Korean Peninsula conflicts, the one he had earned the day Haeunsu died. Admiral, may I show you something that my species does to honor our fallen? Teho walked to the center of the room and, to the amazement of every Vorthok present, he knelt down on the metal floor. He placed his medal on the ground in front of him. This is for Haeunsu, who taught me that protecting others is the highest form of strength, he said quietly. This is for the 137 humans who died today fighting to protect people they had never met. This is for the Vorthok soldiers who died doing what they believed was right, even though we were enemies. Genesio and Bitna knelt beside their captain. From their ships, other human officers were doing the same thing on their bridges. We kneel not in surrender, Teho explained, but in respect. We remember those who gave their lives so that others might live. We honor the sacrifice that makes us human. For a long moment, nobody moved. The Vorthok officers stared at the kneeling humans, trying to understand what they were seeing. Then something unprecedented happened. Admiral Kreshtar, Supreme Commander of the Vorthok War Fleet, apex predator of a race that had never shown weakness, slowly lowered himself to one knee. I do not fully understand, he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, but I think I want to learn. Captain Vextai gasped. Several other Vorthok officers made sounds of shock. In 3,000 years of recorded history, no Vorthok leader had ever knelt to anyone or anything. Admiral Vextai stammered, What are you doing? Kreshtar looked up at his second-in-command. I am learning, Captain, that there are different ways to be strong. He turned back to Teho. Captain, I propose something that has never happened in Vorthok history. A ceasefire. Not because we are defeated, but because we need time to understand. What we have seen today, Teho stood up slowly, leaving his medal on the floor as a permanent memorial. What terms do you propose? The Vorthok fleet withdraws from all captured systems. We return the populations we have taken. We give your Galactic Council time to prepare for. It's a different kind of conversation. And in return, said Kreshtar, still kneeling, you teach us what it means to be human. You show us how protecting others can make a species stronger instead of weaker. Teho extended his hand to help the massive alien stand up. Admiral, I think that can be arranged. Kreshtar rose to his feet with Teho's assistance. Something fundamental shifted in the galaxy. For the first time in 3 millennia, an apex predator had learned that true strength sometimes meant choosing mercy over conquest. Years later, in a classroom on Nexus Station, Cadet Subin raised her hand during a history lesson. Kite, she asked, why did Admiral Kreshtar kneel? He was the strongest warrior in the galaxy. The old instructor smiled. Because Cadeti learned something that day that changed everything he thought he knew about strength. What did he learn? He learned that the most powerful predator in the galaxy is the one that chooses when not to hunt. The lesson continued. But the story of the day, an apex predator knelt before human compassion, had already become legend. It was the story of how 2 species learned that there were many different ways to be strong, and that sometimes the greatest victory was teaching your enemy to choose a better path. In the end, Admiral Kreshtar discovered that humans were indeed apex predators. But they were predators who hunted war itself, seeking to replace it with something better. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all.